Stay with that story now. I'm joined in studio by Economist Tiego Nwokoro to zoom in on the Presidential Economic Advisory Council's first meeting and its outcomes. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I mean, let's not start with the Advisory Council. Let's actually start by just giving an overview of the economy in South Africa, right? How is it that even though we're one of Africa's most industrialized economies, we're finding it hard to reboot our economy? We saw, I think, back in 2017, where President Cyril Ramaphosa came to power, there were all those hopes that this will, in fact, reboot South Africa's economy. That excitement was short-lived. Why have we reached this point?
I mean, it's a whole lot of issues, but the structural factors are at play here. So lack of competitiveness is one big problem that we have in South Africa. Although we are so industrialized and diversified in terms of our economy, if you're going to compare us to our peers in Africa, the competitiveness is still not at a global standard. And this is a global economy. That's why the global economies, if you take the average, we're always going to lag behind it because they are more competitive in their economies. But also, there's a mismatch between jobs and skills in this country. And also there's a large population of people that could be working but are not working, either because they don't have the correct skills to be employed, or they just don't know what to do in this climate. So those are the energies that we need to harness and build the economy with. But we're not seeing much in that space. I'm hopeful that this council that is intergenerational, I'm seeing young guys there that is hopeful, and also not only orthodoxy, but let's introduce some heterodoxy into this. We know that the textbook economics doesn't work in the real world. So let's face the real world. Let empirical evidence give us, what we need to do. Let the numbers speak for what we need to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also let's speak about, we saw today President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking on a number of reforms that, they will be working on. But the criticism that has been received by many analysts is the fact that, yes, there's all these reforms, but President Cyril Ramaphosa's, ability to implement these reforms have been hampered by the infighting within the ANC and also the opposition that has been received by the unions, COSATU and the SACP. Would you agree with that?
Yes, there's no illusion that there are clashes within the ruling party and within government, all spheres of government. And so those clashes, until politics is fixed, it's part and parcel of the economy. We just separate them for convenience, but they're really the same thing. So they're not going to be able to move until they come to they're never going to agree on all the issues, but the most important issues that are going to propel the country forward, so that we're in a position to better take advantage of this frontier that is upon us.
Absolutely. And in your view, why would you say there is a need for this kind of council to have been set up? In I think just a month's time, on the 1st of November, we're seeing another credit review. There's been speculation that we will be downgraded to junk. What is the importance of having a presidential economic council set up?
So, the markets, but by that I mean the investors, they like to see some action. This is a step in the right direction, but it's substance. We're not just talking now, it's going to be substance. And I was very encouraged to hear the word monitoring, because most of the time we implement, and then when it comes to monitoring, we don't follow through. And that's why all of these brilliant policies and projects that we have, we're not seeing the outcomes that we expect.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you touched on investors, right, and how they want to see action. In your view, over the years, with what has taken place, how has this really deterred investors, the slow pace of economic reboot?
Yeah, now the factors that come into play are also not only hot money we do get, which is short-term investment. You don't want that. You want factories to be set up in South Africa, because that's going to create jobs for the unemployed that we have in the economy. But if you have policy flip-flop. I mean, one day it's this, the next day you don't know. Then, even investors are not, they plan ahead. And if they're not sure of the environment, of course they're going to be cautious and they're going to look elsewhere. We're not the only country in Africa that is looking for investment. We are competing with against other countries. Also, capital from South Africa is being invested in other African countries. So ask yourself that if South Africans themselves are seeing opportunity elsewhere and they feel like our money is not well spent in South Africa, then it's a deeper problem than what we're talking about.
And I mean, the president also touched on the EVs and ways in which they're trying to make it easier for tourism in South Africa and for people to do business within our borders. But the other argument has been that it's way too easy for people to get into South Africa, especially to commit crimes. What do you say about that?
Yeah, when you introduce something, you must have looked at the pros and the cons. And then you cannot just say, I'm not going to move because there's going to be criminal elements. You have to devise a plan that is a multi-pronged approach that deals with all the elements that you see and open it up. Put it in the public so that you can get their views. In that way, we get an outcome that is, more responsive to the needs of the country.
Yeah. And just to wrap up our conversation quickly, your hopes for this advisory panel over the next 3 years, what are you hoping they'll be able to achieve?
I'm hoping they'll be able to codify all the learning that will happen and all the learning that has been happening in the SOEs, in the government departments, and if they can, I don't know, how far they're reaching, but also on the shop floors. We need to know what is happening in the economy, the people that are creating the goods that we're consuming. If we can get some learning to say, okay, now we're here, this is the next step for the next 3 years, I think we would have done us a great service.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was Economist Tiego Nwokoro.